Hi everyone, so I'm Jeremy, an artist in the exhibition. I'll be interviewing Daniel for his work. Daniel and I actually both go to COFA together, and we met because our studios are across from each other, and I admire your practice a lot. So Daniel, what I wanted to sort of start off with is, a lot of you that might not know Daniel's practice, he's sort of famous these days for enormous and small 3D printed sculptures of statues that he uses wax and beeswax. And this sort of term of multidisciplinary artist is thrown around a lot, but I think it really does apply to Daniel's work. He works with felt, with oil paint mixed with wool, with wax, with 3D printing. So I sort of wanted to start with that, saying like, how do you link all of these works? You did talk about this as a type of painting, but how do you link them all, and how do you consider this as part of your drawing practice?
Yeah. So I consider myself probably a failed drawer, a retired painter, and a pretty decent sculptor. And kind of that's been various modes that I've gone through throughout the creation of my artistic process. But instead of it being something that's been anchored to medium specifics, it's been more anchored to ideas. And a lot of my practice has kind of began delving towards things such as the way myths and national myths and bits of history are kind of created and constructed, and how there's various slippages in the way narratives and timelines kind of assemble and come about. So this practice here that I developed during my honours is a practice where I look at sheep shearing mythology, and it looks at kind of the Heidelberg artists of the 19th century and the works that they produced that were very much these like dramatized and kind of hyperbolic versions of strong masculine labor, and they kind of obfuscated a lot of the realities of working conditions of sheep shearers as they live their lives. So this work here is called Stryker's Library, and it's taken from archival images in the State Library of Queensland, I believe. And this series shows how there is this labour and union movement associated with the production of sheep shearing, which is kind of often overlooked through these grand romanticised images of how shearing is kind of presented. I'm kind of responding to that, and I'm using textiles as a way to link to the thread and that kind of aspect of wool, various aspects such as gendered notions, and there's also like a lot of histories of that masculine kind of element to it that I kind of wanted to bounce between, but it's also looking at underpainting and underdrawing, and a lot of the palette is kind of evoked from there, but also evoked from various studies that Tom Roberts did while looking at sheep shearing. So when he went to these various sheep shearing stations, was aware of the conditions that these sheep shearers were under. So a lot of the studies that he does have of this, they're kind of like these splayed, almost spectral people of working in like very tight knit conditions and stuff, and then he brought it out and made it this grand romanticized kind of image. And I guess in my practice here, it's kind of like looking at what are the other stories in sheep shearing that haven't been told, and kind of looking at the narrative thread of that.
Right, so you've mentioned history a few times, and
Yeah.
we all know how fraught history is these days.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, you spoke about story and narrative. Do you have a philosophical position on history and how it's created, especially in Australian context? Is that because I notice it is a thread throughout your work, historical perspective?
And I guess if you relate it to my PhD practice, which is involved in 3D scanning, 3D printing various statues of the British monarchy that have replicas around the world, I feel I must have always been working within that idea of how narratives and stuff are constructed, and by approaching them through how institutional protections kind of keep statues apart, and how that actually gets transferred into the production of 3D scanning. So when I've gone to these various locations around the world and asked for permission to 3D scan, they'll give me a set of conditions, and those conditions involve you're not allowed to use raised vehicles, or you're only allowed to do it from a certain vantage point, and it captures that in the statues that I scan themselves. So they're actually these like very physically embodied aspects of public art procedure and policy, And that has kind of been where sculpture's really activated a lot of different threads for me.
You're also a curator at Draw Space as well. You've got you've got materiality on right now, so check that out. You've also got Texture, which is coming up, which I'm in. How does your artistic practice, multidisciplinary practice, influence or impact upon your curatorial philosophy or style?
So my curatorial philosophy is kind of about noticing patterns in contemporary art, and a lot of that is accessed through the HDR studio crits that I run between National Art School, SCA, and UNSW. So I kind of noticed, at least at UNSW, kind of an absence of that New York style of artists visiting studios, curators, collectors, and kind of like seeing what's happening. And like after COVID, like that kind of dialogue between students had gone to the wayside. So me creating that process was starting that dialogue up once more. In doing so, and by coming across a whole bunch of artists through various institutions, I've noticed that everyone kind of has various pockets to which they work towards, and it's about kind of grabbing those pockets and turning them into shows. One of them, more than a few artists have shown text to practice in these studio crits, and I think that was a prompt for me to begin the process of actually curating a show and reaching out and kind of getting artists to find community, much the same way this draw show has, where it's got a bunch of artists kind of working in unison together.
So it's kind of like an investigation. You're sort of finding what are the rivets that are common. Okay.
Yeah.
The last thing, two last things is, with your practice and with the different materials, do you have to mentally switch from 3D printing to the thread works to drawing? Does it make you think of the different mediums as impacting your state when you make art?
So kind of on a mentality perspective, I was really passionate about learning how to learn oil paints. Like I didn't get access to it when I was in high school, so coming to university I really wanted to kind of get embedded in that particular medium and kind of learn about that medium. And I think as I kind of developed my interests, I found a way that it found real harmony with things like underpainting and threading and stuff. So that was, for me, kind of thinking through the subject in a mode that best represents it. And I think that's kind of worked in creating 3D scanning and waxworks, but in the past I've also done things with drawing and printmaking and poetry.
When locomotives drive the Brookvale streets, Sergi recites the golden days of pubs, a time before he sat in stockpiled seats, a time before he went to rostrum clubs,
a time when people listened.
Immobile humans fill congested roads, as traffic lights transmit by divine codes, a time of ordered system.
So like, it's really like, I don't see mediums being the particular thing, but more just like how do you best present an idea, and sometimes various mediums do better jobs at presenting them than others. Yeah.
Okay, great. I'll end with the question we've all been asked is, what is drawing to you? Where do you see drawing going?
Drawing has really, especially in the past year, and I think also just becoming a little bit more involved with National Art School through the studio crits is like really popping off. There's a lot of enthusiasm and encouragement for contemporary drawers, and although I'm kind of no longer a practicing drawer, like I in the past have been kind of involved in running life drawing classes and things such as that. So I definitely kind of saw it in the past being kind of put to the wayside, and I think it's just been really great now to see so many contemporary drawers do so many interesting and ambitious things with their projects.
Great, thank you, Daniel.
Cheers, Jerry.